Now we're moving into the area of shanks. What are shanks? By definition, a shank is an improvised stabbing weapon. Unlike actual fighting knives and knives designed for stabbing and cutting, what you are statistically most likely to be punctured with is a pen or a pencil. These things are everywhere. You find them in blue-collar environments as well as white-collar, in schools, workplaces, things like that. Somebody becomes enraged, they grab the closest, sharpest thing they have, and they begin to go to work on you. Now, because of the relatively fragile structure of a pencil or a pen, they tend to use the overhand grip to get that extra power. So you're very likely, according to one study, you are 5 times more likely to get stabbed in the neck or face when somebody uses this kind of grip. Contrary to popular belief, there's a certain state of mind out there where people are trying to tell you that this attack only exists in movies, that nobody actually attacks that way. It's pretty stupid. When it comes to improvised weapons like these small shanks, it's very, very common to have somebody hold it like this. You can very easily lose an eye or get a puncture in your neck. All right, let's look at some of the defenses. The first kind of shank we talked about is what I call the white collar shank, non-metal shanks. By definition, a shank is an improvised stabbing tool. The most common one in North America, which most people don't realize, is a simple pencil. For the sake of you being able to see well on camera, we're going to use a big red training knife here. But remember, the most common thing is a pencil or pen. And because of the relative fragility of this design, if this were a pencil, the guy's probably thinking it's going to break if it hits his rib or it doesn't feel strong. So it is very common for people to use this reverse grip, despite what some sources are saying that this only exists in movies. In fact, this is the most common way that you're going to lose an eye or get a puncture in your neck. Now, the first thing we need to realize about shanking attacks is they do not happen like the movie, where it's a big overcommitted thrust and the guy does this and lets you perform his defense. In fact, according to the Lafon study, which was looking carefully into weapon defenses, or weapon attacks I should say, one of the most common uses of the reverse grip is what was referred to as the woodpecker. It was quick, low impact strikes, usually from the elbow, so there wasn't a lot of wind up. When you've got a pencil to the eye or a pair of scissors, it doesn't take a lot before your neck is perforated. So sometimes it's not always about the power stroke, it's about faster repeated, and that can be more problematic. But let's begin with a more power stroke. Now, if I have the same flinch response, I'm going to have to treat this pretty much like we did the punch. It's not ideal because of the reverse grip. You may end up being able to peel my back, but there's no way that's going to be a fatal or even dangerous blow, and you may not feel it in the middle of the fight. Now, as weapon attacks get farther away, your brain has more time, your visual field is expanded, so your brain has more time to process the stimulus, so the reflex becomes less and less likely to occur. So let's assume that I have a partial reflex and then I see the weapon coming. Traditionally in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and lots of other arts, they're going to use an upper block like this. It's a really natural thing to do. Now let's look at the proper way to do it. One of the arguments that people have against this traditional upper block is that if the person's very strong, he's going to hammer his way through, and it's not as strong as possible. So put that down for a second and push on my arm with 2 hands, push it down. And I'm going to resist. Yeah, again, it can be relatively weak depending on the angle. So one way that we can mechanically strengthen that position, which most people don't realize, is a simple upward arm bend like that. So when he pushes on with 2 hands now, 2 hands, it's much stronger in this position, okay? Now at the same time, pick up the shank. As he does the multiple attacks, this doesn't do any good. It's gonna break contact, he's gonna get another chance, it's gonna break contact, he's gonna realize there's a barrier in here, and he's gonna start going around. Really common idea. Most people understand this if they analyze this situation. So in the old days, even Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was doing this, but I don't believe they've done that since the 70s. What you need to do is put a hook on the end. So this stronger mechanical position allows you to hook that. And when he pulls, he's going to pull you into it. That's a more realistic way to use this upper block position. Remember, by bending your wrist in this position, it mechanically makes your arm stronger and makes it natural for me to get this hook. So as he pulls the pencil off the table, I have a partial flinch reflex, and boom, he pulls back and I hook it. Now, we're going to look at a couple of different ways to disarm it. The simplest one is to use that 90-degree angle. Let's look at the simplest of the disarms and defenses we can do. So as I come and block in this stronger mechanical position, your other hand should be up like this. It's better to get this through your hand than through the eye. And remember, your eye is one of the most common attacks in the real world. If he has a pencil or a pen in his hand, he's thinking, what can I take out? I know this pencil isn't strong. You know, subconsciously he wants to go for something that is much softer than the pencil itself. So after I block, he tries to pull it away and I can hook him. Many times, because of the relationship here, by holding a shank or even a knife in this 90-degree position, he sets up a lever. My forearm can work right against that, and I just twist it out of his hand. A lot of people see this and, oh, that's never going to work, blah, blah, blah. Again, I've seen this happen accidentally in high-speed, full-speed training. Whenever you're that close to a 90% lever, any attempt to move it often knocks it off. So if you're planning to, that's a simple way to do it. Some people try to open their hand and grab. It's just too difficult and it can hurt your thumb. The idea is to block, hook, and strip out in one motion. All right, next, let's look at a more classic defense that is usually taught in both combat sambo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a shoulder lock. It's a good one. It takes more practice. You're going to have to do your repetitions. Remember, again, somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 repetitions is necessary to be able to do a gross motor skill under stressful conditions. But everything is the same. He tries to stab me. Again, if I see it coming a little earlier, I can use the second hand to hit at his bicep, so I'm taking some of the steam out of his blow. Let's look at that again. So one is blocking at 90 degrees, one is hitting here. If I'm a little bit later, like we were talking about earlier, I want this hand somewhere near my face, because if it gets through this line of defense, I'd rather get hit like this than be walking around with a patch over my eye and working on a pirate ship. So when I hit like this, he's now going to try and pull back. He's common to get that second blow in. As long as I got my hook here, I want to go with him. Basic jiu-jitsu idea of going with the force. This hand can then transfer behind and actually hits the back of his tricep to both help unbalance him and set up my shoulder lock. I want to overlap my hands, and the key point here is to glue his elbow against my chest and squeeze my elbows together. This takes all the play out of his arm and makes the joint lock a lot tighter. Now, if I start cranking really hard, I'm not only going to blow out his shoulder before he hits the ground, but I'm able to also get at him in the same way. Boom! When we hit, he may not have released the weapon, although that's unlikely if the lock has gone well. And you see the lock I've got here? It's basically the same one as I showed you earlier, except I'm not using this grip. I'm going to maintain the same grip I had, and I put my knee here for leverage and I pull. He's either going to let go of the weapon by now if he hasn't, or I can finish off his shoulder if I wasn't able to blow it out with the initial movement. Let's look at another approach to these common shanking attacks. Now, a lot of the time, you're going to have problems controlling this. You're going to get contact, but maybe you're slipping off, whatever. I want to use my second hand, not only here, but to grab it and pull it into you. This is really important, and this is a key concept that we're going to be returning to when we're doing other kind of edge weapon defenses. It's much better for me to be on the outside of him, controlling his arm with both of my arms. In fact, statistically, the most common kind of defense that people have done in the real world, often completely untrained people who've been able to defend themselves against edge weapons attacks, what they have in common is generally some kind of double hand grab on the weapon-bearing limb. So what we're going to do is use the best, strongest kind of grab that we know. This is known as an outside Russian. I'm going to put my head into his so that he can't push into me. I want to control his shoulder. I want to glue his elbow into my chest. And I want to control my wrist here. Now, in this situation with that 90-degree lever that he set up again, I can strip it out the same way, very similar to what we did before. But more importantly, I can put pressure on his elbow. I can take him down. I can switch to a armpit lock known as the wacky gatami. We're going to be covering that in subsequent lessons in detail, so I want to stick to the particulars that are common to this grip. So let's look at that again. He's going to bring it back. I'm going to bring this hand and switch off so I can come to here to a controlled position. Now if his head's already down, I just have to put pressure on his elbow and I've got a lock here. But let's look at the same kind of strip out that can occur because of that 90-degree relationship to his hand. Because we're talking about a shank here that has no edge, these kind of strip outs are tailor-made for these kind of weapon attacks. Here's a shank defense drill that you can do with a partner. It takes a little bit more skill, but it's a lot of fun and it combines a lot of these concepts into one simple drill. The main idea here is that we don't have to keep disarming, picking up the weapon. We're going to go back and forth in a give and take method, which gets in more repetition, makes us form kind of a rhythm, and you'll get a lot more done that way. The first step is the same. I'm going to use one of the blocks that we did before. Now instead of stripping it out like I would normally, I'm going to use my second hand and learn what's called a scraping disarm. You're going to see this again later, but it's a good way to bring the weapon into my right hand. Then I feed Dave, he defends and does the same thing, and he's got it in his hand. And again, we just keep going back and forth, switching the weapon. Now what I'm doing here for this disarm, it's the same concept, and I'm going to use my free hand. Why? So it ends up in my right hand and I can feed him right away. But the point being is if I was actually going to use this disarm, although I could do this against a shank because there's no edge, I want to get into the habit of safely disarming a weapon if I have to. I'm going to use the back of my hand, where if I get a cut, it's not going to have much effect. But if I get a cut here on the inside of my arm, I can damage my nerves, I can hit the major arteries, and I can cause a lot of hassle that I can avoid simply by using the back of my hand. I slide it down here and I turn my wrist out. With a little bit of practice, some kind of shank is going to end up right in your own right hand with the reverse grip, which then allows me to feed it to Dave, who does the same thing. And we go back and forth. Sometimes I go under the arm, sometimes I go, oh, didn't give me much of a, sometimes I go over, but I'm always trying to feel the blade with the back of my hand. Then look at the pressure. As it's about to pop out, I can feel it. I turn my palm outward, and most of the time I catch it. Sometimes do not. It actually works better if you do it a little faster. Good. This time I'm thinking late. I wanted this hand to cover my face in case, and I keep changing the different versions that we do. And I can start speeding up the drill, which is the ultimate goal. You want to start doing this quickly so that you don't have much time to think about it and you have to feed him right away. This eliminates a lot of the talking that we do. You get a lot more repetitions. And as he gets good, he wants to pump it now and not just give it 1-2s. So I don't have to go fast, but I need to start pumping that weapon. That's important to get the pumping action. You see how two hands help reduce that? In reality, I could just pop it out with my forearm, but it's going to hit the ground. We're going to have to stop. Instead, I go here, use my forearm, and we go back again. Now, Dave's only done a few repetitions of this, and he's already pretty good at it. Everybody makes mistakes. We know when we get hit. And the game goes on. All right, so there we have a pretty complete approach to the non-metal shank, what I call the white collar shank. We've got some new school approaches, we've got a couple of traditional ones, and a very functional drill that kind of blends it all together and forces you to build up more speed, more rhythm. It's a lot of fun, and it's going to bring you up to speed really quickly.